Hello everyone, welcome back to the evolution of horror. A quick note from me and a quick apology. I know that we are in the middle of a little spontaneous hiatus right now. I did have to take a bit of a break from our vampire series a few weeks ago. Basically a lot's been going on. I got very, very ill for a while, so I wasn't able to actually record or edit any episodes. Then I got married, and now I'm off on my honeymoon. I've also been at Fright Fest, so there's been a little bit too much going on, so we are a little bit behind with the vampire series. However, just a quick note to say that I will be back. We will be bringing you the next part of our vampire series in about 2 or maybe 3 weeks time max. The next episode will be discussing The Hunger from 1983 and Near Dark from 1987. So that's going to be our next double bill, and I promise when we return we will be coming back weekly with brand new vampire episodes that will see us through all the way to the end of the series. And the vampire series will be coming to an end right around Christmas at the end of the year. So we'll be back later on in September, and we'll then be carrying on through all the way to the end of the year. But in the meantime, I thought I'd bring you guys a little preview of what we've got going on Patreon over the next few weeks for $10 subscribers, because it's a big time of year, obviously, for horror fans, particularly big this year because mid-October, the 14th of October, I believe, sees the release of the brand new Halloween film. This is the final chapter in the new Blumhouse trilogy of Halloween movies. This is reportedly the final Halloween movie in the franchise. This is, of course, David Gordon Green's Halloween Ends. So I thought this would be the perfect opportunity to do a long-awaited franchise review and discuss every single movie in the Halloween franchise. That's 13 movies altogether. So today on Patreon, we dropped part 1 of our exclusive Patreon Halloween miniseries, in which Stacey Ponder and I discussed Halloween from 1978 and Halloween 2 from 1981. Then every week from this point onwards, we're going to be discussing another pair of Halloween movies. Each week I'll be joined by a different guest. So we're going to go to Halloween 3 and 4 next week, then Halloween 5 and 6, 7 and 8, etc. Eventually ending on a deep dive of Halloween Ends on the week it's released. So if you are interested in the Halloween movies, you're not going to want to miss this mini-series. And I thought I'd bring you guys an exclusive little preview, the first 15 minutes of our new Halloween episode, to hopefully whet your appetite. So here it is. Here is a little preview of the first part of our Halloween retrospective, which is out right now on Patreon. Enjoy. Hello and welcome to our Halloween retrospective, a brand new mini-series available exclusively here for $10 patrons of the evolution of horror. Over the next 7 weeks, we are going to be looking at every single movie in the infamous Halloween franchise, from the original in 1978 through to the many, many sequels, through to the Rob Zombie reboots and the recent Blumhouse movies, in preparation for the supposed final Halloween movie in the franchise, Halloween Ends, which comes to cinemas on October 14th. So strap yourself in. It's going to be a bumpy ride. There are some great movies to discuss and some really, really bad movies to discuss. In every episode, I'm going to be joined by a different guest to discuss a different pair of Halloween movies. And of course, this is part 1, in which me and my guest will be discussing Halloween from 1978 and Halloween 2 from 1981 in spoilerific detail. So please enjoy. I sat down with writer, journalist, podcaster, and good friend of mine, Stacey Ponder, to discuss these 2 good Halloween movies in depth. Enjoy. Hi, Stacey Ponder.
Hi, Mike.
Hello, it's so good to have you back. Thank you for venturing from Gaylord's Manor all the way over here to the EOH VIP lounge, right? It's a pleasure to have you back.
Oh, well, thank you for letting me behind the velvet rope. It's very exciting.
Pleasure. So the last time you were here on Patreon, we were discussing the Friday the 13th franchise together, right?
Hey.
You're a fan of that. You told me, you're a bit of an apologist. You kind of, unconditionally love most of those Friday the 13th movies, right? What about the Halloween franchise in comparison? What are your feelings towards Halloween in comparison to Friday the 13th, would you say?
Well, I'm always surprised to find myself such a Friday fangirl. Mm-hmm. Because if you just ask me outright, I'll be like, no, I mean, I like it. But then the moment I start talking about it, I know my eyes light up and I'm like, oh yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
Halloween, it's insane to me because the original film especially is so formative for who I am as a horror fan, and it's a masterpiece and I love it. There are a couple of other entries that I really love as well, but overall I just can't call myself a Halloween franchise fan.
No,
I can't.
No, me neither. I'm exactly the same. I think, if you look at all of those big franchises, Friday the 13th and Elm Street and that kind of thing, I would say Halloween is one of the weakest, isn't it? In terms of the quality of the franchise overall, it's all over the place, isn't it? In terms of quality and the story and the kind of retro, the kind of retroactively kind of rewriting everything in every other movie. It's kind of a mess of a franchise, I think, isn't it?
It is. I think its sister franchise in that regard is probably Texas Chainsaw.
Yes.
And I think it's because both of those movies should have stopped at one.
Yes.
They're perfect films on their own, but of course, producers are going to be like, we could get a lot more money out of this. And so how do you take a perfect film that has a really small scope?
Right.
And expand it into a never-ending franchise? And Texas Chainsaw is like, what if we just do the same thing over and over again?
Yes.
And Halloween is like, let's come up with as many stupid theories for Michael Myers as we possibly can.
Right. That's something that, we'll talk about as we talk about these two movies, and I'm going to talk about with other guests throughout this series is, Michael Myers as a character and what his MO is from film to film, right? And exactly what he wants and why he's doing what he's doing. Because I feel like that is something that no filmmaker has been able to exactly figure out after the first movie, right? It's like, and I guess you're right, the first movie is such a beautifully simple premise and such a simple character that it's like, how can you build a whole franchise upon something that small scale and simple,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so they try to explain away what in the first film they were saying was unexplainable.
Yes.
And so it's just, the franchise is just fighting with itself all the time. And every new filmmaker that comes on board and is like, I've got the ultimate vision.
Oh, God.
They just kind of disregard everything that's come before and do it their own way. And none of us are happy. None of us are happy with all of this.
None of us are happy about it, and yet we all go see them. This is the other thing, though, right? And sometimes I kick myself for it, but I still do get a little pang of excitement every time there is a new Halloween movie, even though I know it's going to be terrible, right? And we all go in. These new Blumhouse ones have made a shit ton of money, haven't they? That's the thing. It's like, for whatever reason, the world loves this universe and they love the character of Michael Myers and Laurie Strode as well. But there's something about this world that really sort of captivates horror fans, doesn't it? I think
I feel like so much of it, so much of it owes to John Carpenter's score for the first film.
Yeah.
It is so. It just evokes something in me as a horror fan, and I think in so many, that I was not at all excited about Halloween 2018. But the minute the music started playing,
Right.
I was like, oh yeah, here we go.
Yeah.
And then it was nothing but disappointment upon disappointment. But still, like, all I need is that music. And it just, I think the first film is so strong that all of your residual good feelings come roaring back.
Yes, absolutely. You're so right. And I think, you know, going back to what you were saying about how simple the movie is too, because I think there's something really interesting. There's some, you know, this was something I looked at when I did my season on slasher movies and the kind of the way they evolved. And, you know, it feels like Halloween was a kind of boiling pot of all these components that came before it, right? You know, whether it's those kind of, you know, body count movies from Herschel Gordon Lewis, or Psycho and Peeping Tom in 1960, or Giallo, or of course those kind of proto slashers like Black Christmas or Texas Chainsaw, right? And it feels like he picked elements of different movies, him and Deborah Hill. They kind of picked elements from some of those movies, but kind of also stripped it back, right? And just made like the perfect, simple story that kind of gave audiences sort of exactly what they wanted from all of those other movies, you know?
Yeah. It's something that for something so simple, it had never really been seen before.
Right.
And it's one of those movies that is just lightning in a bottle, where all of the elements come together. You know, you've got master filmmakers behind the lens. You've got really engaging actors. You've got a charming script. You've got atmosphere on atmosphere. And it's all done with a low budget. And so all of those elements really they couldn't rely on, you know, flashy effects and all of this.
Yeah.
They just told a really good story in a really masterful way.
Right, exactly. Do you remember the first time you ever watched Halloween? Like how early in your kind of horror life was Halloween for you?
It was, I mean, I think probably I was maybe a tween.
Yeah.
You know, like right when I started getting into slasher movies. I feel like I have more early memories of Halloween 2.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Than I do of Halloween 1, but so many moments in the first film are just, I mean, the whole film is embedded in my brain, but so many moments in it just scared me beyond belief.
Right.
So it was just it was just there throughout my childhood and moving into my teen years when slashers really were the name of the, you know, they were the order of the day for sure.
Totally. It's always like, again, it is like, I think for certain generations of us, it's always the first subgenre that we fall in love with as horror fans, right? When we're young, it's the slasher movie, and Halloween is, of course, kind of chapter one of that, really. It's like ground zero of that in a way, isn't it? I think so. Yeah, we probably all see that quite early on. I definitely did, although like many awful millennials, I think I saw Scream first and then referred backwards. You know, so like I had seen Scream was my kind of gateway into horror when I was young, and then obviously all of those movies that characters were talking about in Scream, I was like, I need to go check out all these other films, and then saw Halloween. And yeah, like you, I just remember, because I loved Scream, I didn't find it that scary, but the first time I watched Halloween, I found it genuinely terrifying. Like there was a mood, especially in that opening scene, which we'll get to, and then the scene that comes straight after where he breaks out of Smith's Grove and attacks Marion in the car. Like I remember really vividly those two scenes absolutely scaring the shit out of me when I was a child. You know, it's a scary movie.
It is. I think it's the pacing of it and all of that is, if a tween today was exposed to it, they've seen so much more and are so used to the editing that we have nowadays and all of this, that I wonder how they feel about it. But for me, and also just, I mean, the simple fact of it being tied to the best holiday. Right. That it's like, it's Halloween time, it's time to watch Halloween. Because so many, like, that was such a slasher convention, was because of this movie and because of Black Christmas, like, to name your movie after a holiday and center it around it. But very few of them actually take big advantage of the holiday. Like Friday the 13th That could be, let's face it could be any of the other 364 days a year.
Also, it makes no sense because it's always in the middle of the summer, and yet Friday the 13th doesn't fall every summer, you know? It's like, hang on.
Yeah. And then, like, it's parts, 2, 3, and 4, like, they take place all on the same weekend. Like, it just doesn't matter. But that's Friday for you. Like, who cares? Anything goes. You know?
Yeah.
But this one takes place, especially the first film and second film, because they're together, it's like it takes place on Halloween,
right?
And it feels like it takes place on Halloween.
Yes, so. It's such a vibe, isn't it? I think that's what I really love about particularly these first two movies. The only other one movie like that I can really think of that does that with a certain holiday is my favorite slasher movie, which is Black Christmas, right? Which really has that spooky Christmas, almost like a Christmas ghost story vibe in the way that it looks and feels in that sorority house, you know. But I just, you know, that's another like really beautifully creepy movie that did, I think, something really similar to Halloween, you know, a few years earlier as well.
Yeah,
it's great.
Yeah, with the carolers and all that. Yeah, that one, and I think My Bloody Valentine also, but even My Bloody Valentine takes it so far, and they're like, oh, they live in Valentine's Bluff. Like, okay, you know, it could just be Valentine's Day. Like, that's fine.
I love it. It. So, Halloween, where do we even begin? I'll begin. Actually, I'll tell you what I want to do. I want to start at the beginning of this movie, because something I'm really keen to talk about as I go through this franchise as well is to talk a little bit about the way the credits kind of change and evolve. What do you think of this opening title sequence of the original? Like, you've already talked about that iconic score, right? And that kind of beautifully simple jack-o'-lantern, that font, that music, you know, it's a great title sequence, isn't it?
You know what, I as many times as I've seen this movie, I still made a note, and it's like the second that music starts and then the orange font on the black screen, I'm like, Mustafa Akkad, yes! Like, I just get so excited because it is so simple and also unnerving, and it just really, the only other thing I can think of that really still triggers that same kind of thing in me is Star Wars.
Right,
like that first blast of music. Just, it's so tied to so much of my youth. Yeah. That I can't help but be excited.
Yeah. I love that too. I love how simple it is and somehow really ominous and really scary. It's still kind of scary because you just feel like you're about to watch something truly terrifying, I think, when you watch that opening title sequence. And it doesn't really give you a hint as to what the movie is. You don't know, watching those credits, that it's going to be about a crazed man with a knife necessarily, right? It could literally be anything just from the title Halloween and the image of a jack-o'-lantern at this point, you know?
Yeah. Oh, it could be a trick-or-treat. You know, it could be something like that. Like, yeah, you have no idea. The only thing, the opening credits, that I can't help but notice every time is the jack-o'-lantern face. There's a cut from the nose to the mouth.
Yes!
And it always bothers me.
Yes. There's just that one little slit, isn't there?
Yeah. And so part of me conflates it with the credits for Halloween 2, and I keep waiting for it to split open. And then I'm like, you couldn't just poke the nose. You had to cut from the mouth to the nose. Who carved this thing? And then I get, it's a distraction.
Broomsticks and ghosts, covens of witches with all of their hosts. You may think they scare me, you're probably right. Black cats and goblins on Halloween night. Trick or treat!
And there we go. That's it. That's your preview for our exclusive Halloween retrospective. I know it's very cruel of me, but if you want to hear the rest of that 2-hour episode in which Stacey and I discuss all of Halloween 1 and 2 in depth, then you've simply got to head on over and sign up at a $10 level. I promise it will be worth it. You're going to get 7 episodes discussing the good, the bad, and the hideously ugly from this franchise. So much stuff to discuss. Part 1 is available right now, and Part 2 will be out next week. Head on over to patreon.com/evolution of horror and sign up now. In the meantime, I'm off on my honeymoon, but the vampire series will return when I get back. So join us again soon for all of this and more right here on the evolution of horror.